Today's chat is brought to you by the support of all our Twitch subscribers. Through the patronage you provide the Focus Fire chat team through the Twitch platform, we are able to provide you with the weekly podcast as well as the website and other aspects of Focus Fire chat. If you have any interest in becoming a subscriber of the FFC and gaining access to some exclusive features over in the Discord server, please be sure to visit our Twitch account and click on the subscribe button. If you're an Amazon Prime member, remember that you do have a free subscription to Twitch every month that can be used for this. And for those of you who are already subscribers, thank you again for your generosity.
Welcome to Focused Fire Chat. Explore together.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on December 13th, 2019 over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat as we continue our discussion over the lore book aspect. This particular episode will serve as what we have come to call the advanced session of the week's exploration. Congratulations to those who signed up for a deeper dive. Before we go any further, however, let's run through a quick introduction of who all we have with us on the show. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86.
And this is the crocheting fiend, green-eyed music lover.
Acceptable. And last but not least, in the hot seat as guest
I got
host,
one that works.
we have our good friend
every
Paige.
time.
Paige, how are
Hi,
you
guys.
doing?
I'm doing great.
I get you every time with my different names.
Every time I listen to Focus Fire, you come up with something just totally out of left field. It's great.
I try. It's like,
Jazz it up
for
a
a
little
while
bit.
there, I was attempting to, I was attempting to write it down because, you had the voice of a flower adjusted and then he would have his weird names. And she's like, I'm just going to do descriptors because those are way easier than actual names.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah. But Blue, we are in the advanced episode.
Yep, so let's just jump right into it. So where do you want to just start at the beginning? You think that's the easiest way to go into this?
I mean, I'd say it's chronological, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's time travel. It gets wibbly wobbly really fast.
It gets really wibbly wobbly. I think it's interesting how it starts and ends very similarly, but
Right.
that's
I
also
think
a thing.
I mean, the other thing that I just like, on that note, the names the names of the entries themselves is, and I know this is obviously probably done purposely, but
for sure.
the name, and like as you get deeper into like the actual definitions of the names, it's like I was like, oh, that probably has something to do. No, it has everything to do with it.
I am so glad you put that in the show notes because that was the first thing I wrote down on my notes. And I'm like, I'm hoping someone caught on to this.
Oh my gosh. Like the thing,
because then it started
bookends,
clicking throughout it.
The
And I'm like,
bookend entries are the ones that killed me though. The realists and irrealists. Like that was the thing that I was like, I'm like, okay. So for example, realists is the first entry. And realist is what's called a grammatical mood, which is used to principally indicate that something is a statement of fact. So basically, it's expressing what the speaker considers to be a known state of affair. The example would be something like, he works. This is a direct assertion about reality in regards to the present indicative of the word work. So if I say that he works, that means that he is working. Like right now, currently, he is doing something. It is real right now. And then to jump a little bit ahead, irrealist is the exact opposite. And that's the first and the last entry. So it's like, it's a very interesting dynamic going on. And like the evolution of the definitions as you go through corresponds with the content of those entries very closely. And so, again, we'll definitely probably touch on them each one as we go. But that was one that stood out huge. That one, and then I think it's Atelic was the other one, and we talked about that one a little bit.
Yep.
Atelic has very interesting connotations within regards to not just the context of its card, but actually the whole book, because Atelic is discussing the concept of a terminology or the use of language to indicate a goal or an endpoint. So a telic is actually something that doesn't have an endpoint, whereas telic is something that does. And so having an entry that's called a telic is an interesting component. And then also the entry in itself is talking about the Vex in the garden, and it's an explanation of time from the Vex perspective, or from a perspective of someone who is pretty familiar with the Vex. And that's the one that's Tevis. And that's where we were kind of talking in the introductory session about the analogy of time as a river. It's just, again, it's like those three were just the ones that immediately stood out to me. But yeah, oh gosh. Yeah.
I read them all the first couple times, and then I went back and I'm like, I'm missing something here. So I went back and looked up the definitions after I read the book. And it was so uncanny how directly it not necessarily affected, but like summarized the entry.
Right. Yes. That was, yeah.
Because you can look at each entry's name and be like, oh, so basically that's what happens in the story of that entry.
Do we want to get into the actual thing that happened in Realis?
Sure.
So in Realis, the undying mind lies in the garden, a ruin of metal given over to greenery, a barrow rising out of black soil rich with nitrogen and thought. Everything in the garden becomes of the garden eventually. Shed leaves decompose and fertilize the soil, so do the bones and unspoken ideas of everyone who couldn't find the end of the maze. So do the wordless songs of the Vex gardeners. They walk between the leaves, encouraging growth, laying down their bronze pathways, the only straight lines in all the garden's tangles. The Vex weave themselves into the garden, and the garden returns the favor. Harpies patrol in the air as goblins do on the ground, their veins wafting in still air on their endless, untiring rounds. The pathways lie dull against granite, no powers run through them, not since the heart stopped beating, but the Vex of the soul divisive have programmed themselves to worship the darkness. It has given them power before, and the Vex understand time. What has happened before is, somewhere, still always happening. What will happen is happening now. Soil that lies fallow for a season will recover and produce again. Power that wanes will wax again, if the ground is ready for it. The harpies stop where they are, a shudder running through each of them in order from one end of the garden to the other, a flicker, a wash of power, coming from somewhere distant, a pulse. The power it carries lights up the pathways. The mind's eye blinks for a bare moment, under its blanket of lichen. The power passes through the garden, overruns the Vex machinery within it, floods the network beyond it. A moment held like the shore after the tide rushes out. Motes of something that isn't dust shake in the air. The bronze pathways hum, a counterpoint to the goblin song, and the garden's door vibrates with them. First question, which pulse? Do we know?
I can't say conclusively. I don't think we have like a conclusive answer to that.
I mean, we have mentions of pulses later on in the cards, which referring specifically to like pulses that Praedyth like feels or senses. It's not necessarily the pulse that we all probably thought of initially, which is the pulse of the traveler going back out.
Right.
Though that does, not necessarily suggest, but it does at least bring to light that imagery. But the garden has laid dormant mostly since the death of the heart. But there's another card that talks about how the Vex are trying to regrow the heart, or at least protect the heart. So this one doesn't necessarily mention that, but maybe it's an instance of the heart coming back.
Yeah,
Does the heart pulse?
Not sure.
I mean, we kill the undying mind. That's something that has been said multiple times from a couple different characters, Osiris and Ikora, which, by the way, still bugged by the fact that the teleported...
They just transmatted it.
Like, Vexgate. I know, but, like, it still bugs me.
Actually, my personal opinion is they just pushed it off the edge and put it in a volcano.
Let it shatter.
And some ungodly, like, just some citizens who just showed up to the last city. Oh, it's so beautiful.
Crash.
What was that? The Guardians got done with their experiment. Science fair's over.
Science fair's over. Ikora won. Everyone can go home now.
But this one, it doesn't have so much...
It's more of a
major
a
things.
broad spectrum of what's going on. There's nothing like super huge.
That's true. Blue, did you have anything else that you wanted to discuss about this one?
Not really on this one. No.
Okay. Mirative?
So what is a mirative?
Gosh, this one sent me down a rabbit hole.
I see that. I'm going to let you just take after this one.
Well, okay, so this gets into the idea of what is translations, like translation of things that don't translate into English and vice versa and all that. So mirative, like the base definition of mirative is it's a grammatical mood that expresses unexpected revelations of new information or a surprise. This doesn't exactly, like, mirative does not exist in English. Like, it's not a concept that we have within our language, because English is what's described as a morphosyntactic system. It's not something that does well with this type of grammatical mood. And this was actually this phrase was coined by an individual who goes by the name of Scott Delancey, and I believe it was earlier, but the main work that actually discusses this is the Mirative and Evidentiality article, which he wrote in 2001. And he says in the intro, evidentiality refers to the grammatical marking of the source of evidence for a proposition. Mirativity refers to the marking of a proposition as representing information which is new to the speaker. Mirativity has sometimes been thought of as part of the larger category of evidentiality. Based on evidence from Tibetan, Hare, and other languages, it is argued that mirativity must be recognized as a distinct semantic and grammatical category. And then he goes on to say that the term mirativity refers to the linguistic marking of an utterance as conveying information which is new or unexpected to the speaker. And so his primary example is the Tibetan language and how there is a structural difference in their syntax based on if something was intentional or accidental. And it's really interesting, but it gets really far into the weeds as far as translating them. But he goes on to say, and then he also talks about a couple individuals who looked at Hare and then a few other languages that have similar things. And he also then goes on to say that mirativity is not directly expressed in the morphosyntactic system of English, though, as pointed out by Akasuka, it exists as a covert semantic category. However, it can be marked intonationally. The mirative intonation contour is an exaggerated version of the declarative intonation, which the tonic rise considerably higher. So what that means...
Okay. So a declarative sentence where I have this ball of yarn. There's a tonal, like pitches that your voice will automatically go, whereas like a question will have.
English has a lot based on tone. Like there's a lot of implied context with English. That's why reading text in English is surprisingly difficult, because you miss a lot. Like English is notorious for this. Yeah, there's no inflection. And because I think, what was it? I mean, we've seen this in Destiny with Purple, with our argument about the Warmind entry from way back in D1. And like, she's like, she put a different inflection on the letter A, completely changed the card, completely changed the meaning of the card. And it's interesting to see how that, but yeah, so sorry, go for it, Green.
No, I was just going to say the easiest example is asking a question, because oftentimes when people ask questions, how are you doing? Or where does this place go? You have that where the end of the phrase turns up. But yeah, tonal explanations.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you do a voice study, because I was looking at trying to imitate Morla. She actually breaks so many rules.
What? Morla break rules? No.
Morla, oh my god. It drives me crazy because I can't figure out how she's doing it, because she reads it in such a way that doesn't follow the normal English speaking patterns.
Her interpretation is different than what one's should be.
Yeah. So even just like imitating what she says, if I were to imitate what she says, I can mimic. But if I were to read Eris lines from the lore, it's incredibly difficult to do it in the same way that she would, because I can't figure out exactly what rules she's breaking where.
Well, it's even like reading or like misunderstanding a text message, like, we need to talk. Are you like, oh, we need to talk and like catch up, or do we need to talk and like have a serious conversation?
I'm in trouble.
Right.
That's when I send back the GIF. I'm in danger.
I'm in danger. The little boy sitting on the bus. But okay, so when Mirative, we were talking about at the very beginning how a lot of the titles are really good at explaining somewhat what's going on in the card. So in this card, Praedyth is connecting with the Ishtar Academy group. Like he is, he's connecting to them for the first time, and well, not necessarily for the first time.
No, it is the first time. Well, yeah, I see. I see.
It's not.
He thought they were.
You already said you.
Yeah. He tells the hallucination.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that introduction. He's like, "What? Yep. Yeah, you already said that. What?
So, coinciding with like the Mirative explaining the card, I think it also explained how we took the card, because we're all at least I was, when I first read the word Praedyth, I was like, what? Wait, hold on a second. Something's fishy here. And then I read it as if I was going back to No Time to Explain and listening to Praedyth tell us about what happened and listening to his ghost kind of thing. So I think it also explained our interpretation of the card itself.
I mean, Praedyth now is cut off from everything. He doesn't have his ghost or anything like that. But is it Praedyth trying to, he's getting a little lost in translation? Or is it just the fact that he's unsure of what's changed and why he's able to talk to them? Like, I'm still trying to figure out how it has a direct tie to the Mirative concept.
So I think, like, looking back at it, he was very, like, confident when we heard him back during the No Time to Explain quest. Whereas now he's very, like, skeptical. Like, is this really happening? Can I take what they're saying to truth? Or just kind of his interpretation of what's going on where he's at now.
Makes sense. I think it's funny how he calls out, Veru's calling it out in chat. He doesn't have a fondness for Ashermere either.
I love that.
Say again?
It's not good. Praedyth Radio's talking to him. Which at least he says it doesn't. It's not a familiar voice. He says, because he says he wishes it at least use a familiar voice, a Pahanin or a Teiko or a Kabir or even a Mir at this point.
Right, but later, like, okay, he says his voice,
nearly
his voice face, it hurts to talk. Say again. The hallucination has a new voice, this time sharper, male, nearly Mir-ish. Yep. The band number. Do you think that's Shin? Dr. Shim?
Shim, yeah, I think so. But I just love his reaction. He's like, oh my God.
Uh-huh. He sighs. Catalogs more constellations. And is, oh my gosh. The fact that he's trapped in this cell, which brings up the question, is it a cognitive trap? Or is it a physical trap? Is it yes to both?
I think it is yes to both because, he's in the vault. Like, so
right.
he is physically there, but he's also, chat, irrelevant! It is not a metaphor! He's also trapped outside of time as well, because that was the whole thing.
Right.
He's literally inside the Vex network. Because that was the whole thing at the end, is what they're trying to... That's one of the things that they're trying to get back.
So, if we move on to the next card, we get our first... I'm going to call it an interlude, because it's completely not Praedyth. Has anybody figured out... I've seen theories on it, but I haven't fully bought into all of them with the K's and V's and the
I have no
carrots.
idea. This is like...
Yeah...
For the longest time,
you know what it reminds me of?
I swear, I was like, I was almost like, God, Seth.
You know what my brain went with if the K's were not in there, I could totally follow this because carrots and V's are used to notate down bows and up bows in music for young children.
Okay.
That was the first thing my brain went to and it talks about silent singing, whether or not this is a notation of what he's singing.
Oh.
You know what? If this... Yeah, that's true.
But I haven't seen anything as far as exactly what this is yet. I haven't seen any hidden code in here because believe me, I spent about 45 minutes trying to find something.
What do I have written?
See,
but you get other speakers in here too.
But see, that's
you
the
have
thing
the
is
parentheses.
the Pajari connection there too. Oh gosh, hang on, I'm going to look something up real quick. Continue. I'll be right back.
Okay, I'll just read the card as best I can, and because it's a visual thing with the carrots and everything, it's going to be a little difficult to read that. But I'll do. Yeah. So Nomic goes, he is walking in the garden. He is talking, silent singing. And then there's the little up caret, K, up caret, K, V, up caret, V, up caret, V, up caret, V, up caret, V, parentheses. Watch your six. Don't worry about me. Grow, grow, grow. In parentheses. He holsters his gun to gesture. He holsters his gun to drink. His gun is rusted into its holster, and he will never pull it out again. Parentheses. How bad can it be? How bad can it be? How can we grow, grow, grow? In parentheses. A titan is a wall, a shield, a cup filling itself to overflowing. The container changes the shape of its contents, but the contents change the nature of the container, and the nature is eternity. Parentheses. Who knows what's listening? It's listening. It's saying grow, grow, grow in parentheses. There is a shape that is his mind, and the shape is protect the shape, is sacrifice the shape, is parentheses grow in parentheses. And then more of the little carrots and V's and looks like 5 times. He was named too well. He is his own grave, and the cut on his left hand will never heal. So fun callback to Pajari and the cut and the hallucination back in D1. I guess hallucination / not hallucination.
Yeah, the vision.
Mm-hmm. But there's multiple voices, quote unquote, being viewed here because you have the watch your six, don't worry about me. And there's multiple, it's almost as if there's multiple instances all being thrown into the same card.
Right. It felt very, when I read it, it felt very stagnant. you're stuck at a point but watching everything go on around you kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. He is not. He is walking in the garden. He is talking, silent singing. I mean, it's like stuttering. Almost.
Right.
So the definition of gnomic, while Blue is still continuing and everything, is the expressed in or of the nature of short, pithy maxims or aphorisms, enigmatic or ambiguous, aka this is going to be very ambiguous. Fun fact on this term, we began to use gnomic, which is the adjective form of gnome, in the early 19th century, around 1784 to be exact. I like how you put around 1784.
I wrote that like is a train of conscious thought. So I was reading it and I was like, oh, they actually gave me the full date. Okay, I'm going to go back and edit that real quick.
Blue wrote this in a very gnomic fashion. Rude. This was used originally to describe a style of writing/speech characterized by pithy phrases, which are often terse to the point of mysteriousness. This stemmed from the use of the term gnome, taken from Greek word that translates to know. In the tales, these creatures were couched in metaphorical or figurative language. Couched. That makes way more sense. I was like, I looked back after reading it and I was like, that doesn't make sense. Couched.
Sorry.
They're on couch. They're crouching by couches. They're drinking their brandies and being all mysterious. God, smoke is billowing in blue from a curtained area.
That makes me happy.
Uh-huh. Okay. Let's see. Couched in metaphorical or figurative language, often portrayed as being quite clever and always concise in their manner. Examples of some gnomic poetry are Know Thyself. Too many cooks spoil the broth. Where did that one come from? I've never heard that one.
It's an old English one. It's also too many chefs in the kitchen. You know, too many. I just blanked on the other one, but yeah, I mean, it's basically if there's too many leaders, everyone's too busy leading and not doing anything.
It's a metaphorical like short metaphorical.
Yep.
Statement. These aphorisms were collected into works referred to as nomologia. No, I don't know, which were anthologies used to instruct younger members of Greek society. One of the more well-known of these collections was compiled by Stobaeus in the 5th century AD and remained popular into well into the Middle Ages.
I'm so annoyed that I can't find this. But anyways.
What are you looking for?
So there's a thing, so like the connection that I made, and it was like way back when we first started, and I thought it was the Warlock episode, and it probably was, and I just forgot to write it down. But Pujari is actually a Hindu priest, is the term, is also there, and they are responsible for performing rituals, including puja, which is a very specific, or a very lengthy ritual, I believe, if I'm going off memory here, so I apologize if I misquote or if I misstate that. But the Pujari is the one who performs the puja, and that entails setting things on fire, entails the appropriate singing and all that. And that was where, when we were talking about Pujari way back in D1, I had kind of read up on that, and I was like, that's really interesting, because we knew at the time we had the Warlock class, the Sunsinger, which is the immolation and the self-immolation and then resurrection. And that tied into, and I'm so annoyed at myself because I can't find my notes, but there was a tie-in to an actual Pujari with the figure of Pujari, and it was a really interesting concept. That was, it was around the igniting of a it was something, and I'm so aggravated that I don't have my notes in front of me. But anyways, when you started talking about the singing, that's where I was like, you know what? That actually makes more sense, because I'm still reading this as this is Pujari talking. Because, and I know a lot of people say, are attributing this to Kabir or Cabber or whatever, however you want to say his name, Caber or whatever, the milk stout drinker. But the thing is like when I read it, it's when I see the part that a lot of people are attributing the reason that they say that it's Cabber that's writing this, it seems to me actually that's an outsider looking in, because he says a titan is a wall, a shield, a cup filling itself to overflowing. It's not saying I am a titan that is a wall. It seems to me that it's someone watching that event and is seeing that transpire from an outside perspective. Because then he goes,
I think that, I think the cut on the hand is the larger...
that's my ending argument too, is like,
descriptor. Yeah.
But then also when you say there is a shape that is his mind, and the shape is protect, the shape is sacrifice, the shape is grow. Like, it's when it comes to the parts that is about Caber, there's always a third person
pronoun
syntax. Like, he holsters his gun to gesture. He holsters his gun to drink. It's not I holster my gun, though
it could be. It could theoretically
right. And that's where I was going to say the parts in the parentheses, however, make me wonder. And this is where I can almost see this almost being a case where Pajari might have been in the vault with them. Because again,
that's where,
the only reason I say that is because, again, we know that there was a fire team that went into the vault, but we only have 3 names. We don't know if it was a traditional 6-team raid group.
Right.
The other thing I would argue is that Pajari, this doesn't necessarily mean in the vault. It's in the Vex network. Pajari has been known to be hallucinating because he's getting too involved with the Vex milk and everything like that. And he's been in the Black Garden. He's been in the Vex network.
Yeah, and that's why with the original Shores of Time, it was Vex milk underneath.
Right.
Because I think we had that conversation here, because I think in the new one, it's water, right? It's not.
Because it's on Nessus.
Yeah, okay.
It's not in the Vex.
I think anymore. I remember us having this conversation because that was the other thing is when we see Pajari for the first time, he's thrown himself off of the Shores of Time, which was a map in D1 on
off of Point B.
Oh God, off Point B. Same as the one that's in current iteration. Point B was the biggest suicide leap. But like that was kind of the inside joke. But he was also a Thanatonaut, so he was doing it on purpose to get these visions, to record them. And that was where he had the vision of the garden. But the thing is with the Shores of Time, when you throw yourself off, you fall in Vex milk. So he's committing his own suicide. He's committing suicide, but then he's ending up in Vex. So it's and then the whole connection there was with the Vault of Glass armor. We knew at that time that Vex milk was a very powerful hallucinogen. So there was this huge connection going on there as well.
Yep. You want to move on to the next one? Epistemic.
Sorry. I think it's Mr. Mikey says that he was saying that pretty sure it states somewhere in D1 that it was just the 3 of them going in. And I understand that because also even in here we see Praedyth mention that there was only 3 of them. My one counterpoint, and I'm not going to go on die on this hill, so I'll just throw it out there and then I'm going to leave it. But my one counterpoint is that in the same way that Praedyth has been forgotten because of the way that he was erased, you could technically argue that there could have been others that were erased in the same manner. That
Praedyth would have forgotten the rest of his fire team?
Well, that 3 of them could have been consumed by, what was it, it's not the oracles, it's
Atheon?
the Gorgons.
That got lost. Yeah.
Gorgons.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like they tried to 3-man fog.
There's too many whys.
Yeah.
Or there's too many questions.
This is why Paige loves this entry, is that it answers so much.
Yep, totally.
I actually love this entry because it doesn't answer anything.
It doesn't even try to answer anything.
No.
Nope. It's just a fun read.
And it is. And when you say it reads kind of like music, it's almost as if you have that like melody line and then you have your harmony line.
Your cores,
it's like two different perspectives of the same thing happening.
Yeah, a bit. It's just really hard to, I don't know. It's just,
it's hard to pinpoint exactly what's going on.
There's one that is a constant worry, like a guy answering concerns. Yep. Watch your 6. How bad can it be? How bad can it be? Who knows what's listening? It's listening. Mm-hmm. It's like the inner dialogue. And then you have the not necessarily the thoughts, but the actions that are happening, as well as the thoughts. I don't know. It's interesting. Blue, do you want to take on the next one?
Yes. Epistemic. So epistemic is a term that actually requires a bit of clarification. Epistemic is in itself relating to knowledge and or the degree of its validation. So to be clear, it's an adjective which talks about the act of acquiring knowledge itself. It is often, very often, confused to be the same as epistemology or epistemological. Epistemology is the study or philosophy of the acquisition of proper knowledge, and epistemological is the adjective that refers to epistemology. So the difference is epistemic is actually the acquiring of the knowledge itself, or epistemology is the study of the acquisition of proper knowledge. So it's a very, very, very slight one. But yeah, chat's like, gotta love English. This actually leads to the concept of the epistemic state, which is the topic that discusses the guiding of decisions and what to believe in particular situations. So this is actually not stating anything about the actual truth of a situation, but rather what is believed or assumed within that situation. So this is talking about the experience of the individual who is having the experience, not the actual experience. Which to me makes a ton of sense, but I also have a lot of history with phenomenology. It's the perspective of what's going on, not necessarily what's going on. It's the understanding of the bias of the individual and how they are perceiving a situation, not the de facto true, air quote here, true situation. And the summary of this card really, it kind of talks about that, because this is Pradith discussing his various visions within the vault. And so he starts off actually, and he starts talking about he has watched from his cell for longer than he knows how to quantify, sitting inside looking out. He's seen so many different timelines, there is no way to tell which are real. From a certain point of view, they might all be. And he goes on and he kind of talks about the different iterations of the different timelines. It says some things he recognizes. He sees the traveler often, though he can't feel its light through the bars of his cage. Sometimes it hangs over a city so familiar it makes his heart ache. Sometimes it hangs in an alien sky, and foreign shapes make airy loops around it, ghosts of unrecognizable make. Some visions he gets once, while some come back over and over again. One recurring image, a piece of the traveler cracked off from its body, lying belly up in a forest, with a small figure standing in front of it. The figure changes every time, but the sickly glow of the traveler doesn't. Once, he sees a vision of himself, straight-shouldered, warm in the Martian sun, standing between Kabir and Pahanin. Kabir's helmet is familiar. It's one Pradith helped make. He was a defter hand with spinfoil lamination than Kabir ever was. Kabir has worn that helmet barely 5 years into their life as a fire team, worn it for 6 straight months till he cracked it in half in the crucible. That vision makes Pradith weep. Desiccated as he is, he didn't think he had it in him. The vault shows him Mercury again and again, recognizable only thanks to the scale of the sun in the sky. Sometimes there's rubble hanging in space, a planetary ring still forming. Sometimes there's nothing but rubble, and when he turns, he doesn't see any of the other planets in the system. Gone, somehow eaten down to the crumbs. Pradith wouldn't mind these visions so much if he could only feel the warmth of that colossal sun. His hands are always cold here in the vault. He sees waves of aliens cross the solar system's threshold, emerging into the light from outside the heliopause. Some of them travel with the air of eager, conquering armies, paint fresh and banners snapping. Some of them move as if they're on the run from something behind them out in the galactic dark. He watches the movements of the Vex. He learns to tell them apart. The shining silver ones, the brass ones with back-swept horns, the ones with eyes glowing white. Occasionally, scattered among them, are pockets of Vex stained with verdigris, their arms trailing shawls of moss. All the other Vex keep away from those ones. Twice he's seen other Vex fight the mossy ones. It looks like the other Vex are frightened of them, as much as Vex can be. Some timelines have veils drawn over them, a darkness too thick to see through. They push back through against Praetus' sights, resisting. All the timelines he sees could be true for some living being. He doesn't know which are true for him. He doesn't know if that's a meaningful question to ask. He asks it anyway, and he keeps looking. There's no reason not to. He's got all the time in the world.
Do you have an interpretation on this one, Paige?
So, hold on. Because there's a lot of information being thrown at us, so I kind of had to pick it apart. But, I mean, the biggest thing he points out is all those timelines could be true for someone. But I think the one that stuck out to me is when he's talking about the Traveler and it being cracked and there's a small figure standing in front of it. Like, is that us when we get our light back? Did he see that as it was happening, or did he see it before it was happening, kind of thing? So
or
there's a lot of like...
Did he see it as all the Guardians who are experiencing Destiny 2 as different realities?
Right.
So I have a weird analogy for how I understand the Vex being able to see into the different times like this. Mm-hmm. You know the song, It's 5 o'clock somewhere?
Yeah.
That's what's going on. There's always going to be somebody somewhere doing that.
That's
it's always going
to
be. It's a really dumb way to capture it, but it works.
Yeah. But the other thing that this one really, I mean, it kind of bothers me because you do get the aspect that it's a physical location that he's at. And he's seeing all these different things over and over. And the question I have is, how is he seeing these different things? Every time that we have gone into the Vex network or into Mercury or anything like that, we've been essentially reenacting moments and interacting with them there. Is he in a simulation of it? Is he walking through these different aspects? I mean, he doesn't know what is true at this point, necessarily.
Right.
And it's hard to say what is true in general, just because Vex is not... They just don't make it easy on you.
No, Vex never do.
It's like, is the Saint 14 that we fought alongside in the mission a true Saint 14? I mean, there's just lots of questions to go into it.
It just makes you want to dig. Makes you want to dig, but there's nothing to dig.
I mean, there's pieces you can kind of toy with, for sure.
I think the other interesting aspect of this is he kind of sees how, like, the Vex covered in the moss, he kind of sees how...
The soul divisive?
He sees how they interact with other Vex. And, I mean, we haven't quite seen that in-game, necessarily.
We've read about it in lore a few different times.
Yeah, but we have done that. But we haven't, like, when we go into the Black Garden, we just see the soul divisive. We don't really see them interacting with other Vex.
That's true. My question is the reason why the other Vex so not kosher with the soul divisive, the fact that the soul divisive is the grouping that reprogrammed itself to worship. So in other words, it's other compared to the other Vex. The other Vex does not necessarily do that.
Right. Does it see it as like like a festering wound to the Vex almost? Is it trying to get rid of it?
I don't know. Blue, do you have any thoughts?
No. I mean, no.
Not with
this one. I mean, again, I think that, like we had been kind of saying for the rest of the other ones, the name of the entry really does a good job in summarizing it. He starts off and it's very epistemic. Like he's just experiencing it. He's just acquiring this knowledge. And then at the very end, you kind of start getting into the more epistemological kind of approach, because he's like, okay, but why, like, are any of these actually true? Like, do any of these actually matter? And that's where he starts kind of transcending from, you know, the epistemic, okay, this is the information, but why am I getting it? How am I getting it? You know, what's the point of this information? What's the meaning of that?
Do you think...
Go for it.
Do you think he realizes how he's getting it? Or do you think it's
I don't
just
think
happening?
so. I think it's just happening. Like, I think that's part of the problem with him, with his experience of this, is he's a prisoner of the Vex, and being a prisoner of the Vex, he's stuck with them, and they see time so differently. You know, we'll talk about that here in a second, but like they exist in a whole different level of existence. They perceive things. Their epistemic reality is so much different than ours, because as a intellectually, as a mortal symbiote or a mortal entity, we experience time in a very set fashion. We experience the transfer or the progression of time very, very linearly, whereas a Vex is arguably not that same base. And so with their experience, their epistemic of experience is that it doesn't exist that same way. So for them, this all makes sense. Like they're perceiving this, and, you know, maybe he's just piggybacking on what they're seeing because he's in a prison cell, and they just don't care that he's seeing this. Or, you know, maybe he accidentally broke into something. The thing is, like, because the vault is designed for Vex, it's like he's stuck in an alien spaceship, and the aliens don't speak English. I know chat was talking about Arrival just a few minutes ago. And like, that's a really good example here, because, you know, the whole concept of Arrival is that in understanding the language, you kind of understand, you know, the species. And that's not anything new. That's actually throughout a lot of sci-fi literature, you see that. But
point of order real quick. I think saying that the Vex experience time differently it needs to be fleshed out a little bit more, in so much that they don't experience time backwards or anything like that, but they're able to interact with time in a different way than we do.
Yeah.
And it still flows in, as far as we can tell, in one direction for them. Like, it's still moving forward, but they can step in and out of it.
Yeah, they're not anchored in the flow like we are.
Correct. Correct.
And it's hard because there's, like, time itself is such an artificial construct, but it's also one of those artificial constructs that has been ingrained in humanity for so long that, you know, the idea of
time is just the idea of actions passing,
but
and being able to mark those upon us on a scale of some sort, right?
Yes and no. Like, there is and this is where it gets kind of dicey, because there is varying philosophies of how to tell temporal fluidity. Like, there's issues with that, because time is, a lot of people would argue that time is outside of things. Like, time is just the way time is, but that's not actually true. Time is something that it's a very Schrodinger-like experience. Like, if you don't pay attention to a clock, you don't know what time it is. Like, you might know that it is a certain point in the existence of something, but your experience of time will be fluid. If you're, and this is often the case when you're enjoying yourself, time goes by faster.
Yep.
But that's what I'm meaning is that when you're observing it and you're marking it, you are setting it onto a scale in some ways elongating it rather than, when you're not observant of it and you're just having a good time and enjoying it, it is all the different actions are happening, but you're not making note of minute details within the actions necessarily and creating that elongation upon the scale. It is just passing very fluidly rather than, I guess, I don't even know a good word for
No, I mean,
this.
and that's the thing is
image.
like that. And then, you know, from a philosophical standpoint, you can also ask from certain for certain points of view, time passes differently because for you, 5 minutes might be, but for me, 5 minutes might seem like an hour, but
it's based on your experiences.
Right. And then, if you look at a clock, technically speaking, and this is the part that gets really difficult to like conceive of, because we're so used to having a clock that's telling us that tick, 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 no matter what you're doing, it's that tick, 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 you know, and the idea that doesn't mean anything for a lot of people, it's very uncomfortable because it's like, wait, what? Like that is just an artificial construct that we've put into reality that says we're going to agree that this is air quote time. But at the end of the day, that's not time. Like that's a artificial construct to measure the distance that something has gone. But time itself is something that's arguably more fluid. It's one of those things where it's like it gets really abstract really quickly because you're talking about variety of experiences of a situation, and then you have to agree if there is a real truth or if there's a set of truth, and relativism gets in and messes everything up. And and then
the
Chat's talking about the relativity to gravity, you know, like you have that whole issue.
Black holes and stuff like that. The thing that gets me as far as the easiest way to describe it, it's like looking at music, the difference between like a quarter note and 16th notes. When you're observing it, it looks like it's taking up so much more space on the page, which it does, but it's actually this, like you could have the same amount of time pass between the two of them. Just one's broken up into 16ths and the other one's broken up into just a quarter of it. A beat versus 4 within the beat. Anyway. Moving on, perhaps?
Yes. Please. Like
never-ending loop of time.
I love talking about this stuff because it ties into phenomenology, and that ties into like an individual's experience of something. But you have to, like, before you can start really seriously talking about that construct, you have to also, like, come to an agreement with everyone that's in the conversation that everyone's experience is equally valid, with the understanding that everyone's experience is unique and alien to the other. And so... Also... What was it?
Equally invalid in that respect.
No, right. And that's something that with... Like we always took it in regards to psychology. And so phenomenology from a psychological standpoint is really helpful. Phenomenology from a philosophical standpoint gets really hairy really fast because it can dovetail into very dangerous topics as far as, especially with morality, and stuff like that. But like the thing is like, it's still an interesting thought experiment, but I would probably, we would be here all day because it's fascinating, but it takes so long to discuss because every point of view is something that is equally valid and equally worth exploration, even those that don't make sense or are uncomfortable. Actually, sometimes those are more important to explore. So, and that's where the epistemic and epistemology that's where the difference is. Epistemic is like the actual acquiring of that, which is, again, kind of where we're kind of to bring it back into this entry. Epistemic is Pradith is acquiring this knowledge. And he gets into an epistemological standpoint at the end when he asks, what is the point of this? How am I getting this? What is valid here? That is an epistemological question about the epistemic image or the epistemic information that he has gotten. If that makes sense.
Yep.
So deontic.
Yes, please.
So back to philosophy.
Yeah, I was like,
back to your favorite topic.
Oh my gosh.
The Ansible is a thought experiment. It was proved impossible.
This one actually, from a philosophical standpoint, is really easy to explain. Deontology is a normative ethical theory that is posited within what's referred to as moral philosophy. And it basically says that morality of an action should be based on whether or not that action itself is right or wrong under a series of rules. So it's, instead of based on the consequences of the action. So in kind of a short term, it says ignoring the idea that the end should never be used to justify the means, because the means should justify the means. If the end justifies means that require a sacrifice of doing what is right to achieve that end is in and of itself not ethically acceptable.
Okay.
And then
it's the do good because you're doing good,
correct,
not necessarily because it's going to get you a cookie at the end of the day because you didn't make the teacher mad.
It's not allowing. There's a lot of historical examples of like, oh, the ends justify the means. You know, we'll do these atrocious crimes because in the end we get, you know, fill in the blank of whatever BS reason you want. The argument of deontology is that should never be acceptable. It should be that you are doing the thing that is right and that is just and is good because it is right, just, and good. It's not because you don't get a pass on. Yes, I'm trying so hard not to say that, Green. You don't get a pass for doing something stupid or evil because you argue that the end is good. Like, it can't be good because in order to get to it you have to do evil, right? Does that and that's an argument that is very, very, very divisive on moral philosophy, because obviously the people who are calling the ends that justify the means don't like that being pointed out, and so yeah,
makes things difficult.
And from
in this
a linguistics standpoint, real quick, sorry.
Go for it.
From a linguistic standpoint, deontic is just simply expressing duty or obligation. So it's again, it's not using ethical. It's just saying this is your duty or this is your obligation. I'm done. Thank you, Green.
You're welcome, Blue. So this card's fun because we actually get conversations with some of the Ishtar team. And you get a little bit more of the lovely Dwayne. Lovely, lovely Dwayne. But Pradith is working with them essentially in this one they're kind of debating all the different aspects going on, as well as can he create a radio to call out?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Can he create something with what he's got? So he's got a few different things: laser pointer, focusing crystal, out of his Amalon rifle, which he still has his rifle, which is interesting.
I just love the fact that he acknowledges that Dwayne McKnight is his own worst enemy.
Yep. I think my favorite line in this one is, do you remember the first thing we saw the Vex do? Go for Maya's throat? No, jump into that frame, clear through the air. It's just like, okay, guys.
I just love how one of them is so cheerful.
I just remember reading the Vex cards, or the Vex Grimoire cards, and putting little voices to each of the Ishtar characters. And their personalities are so distinct that even just reading a line without knowing who it was afterwards, you're like, oh, that's that person.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of nice to see that again in this entry.
It is interesting. And it's interesting to see what this group is doing, because this is either 227.13 or 227.204. He's not sure which one, but they're all working together. And we do get some clarification about the Ishtar team themselves, not infinite mirror variations of them from different timelines, but simulations all split off from the same base. So he's figured out that it's not like Osiris.
Right.
It's simulations split off from the original, although Osiris is...
Yeah, except Osiris has a multiple man problem, and
yeah, he does.
Love the presentation of that.
Yep. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot in here that I would say is like super needing to be called out, except for the fact that they're trying to build this radio out. And he's MacGyvering it.
God, I love it.
The best way to describe it.
Yeah.
It does briefly talk about losing his ghost, which I kind of thought was a nice full circle after finding his ghost. But it wasn't, like, extremely significant to...
That was the one we took back to Lakshmi, wasn't it?
Yep. The one that she was like, who is this? What is this? Why are my signatures on this?
Yeah.
Why do I... And she's like the old lady. Why is this familiar, but not at the same time? What is going on, guys? All right. I think we should move right along then, because I don't see too much going on in this one.
It's our favorite.
Yeah. Time. Tag blue.
Oh, now! All right, so... Atelic is a quality of a verb that shows an action as being incomplete. So, like kind of I had mentioned, whereas telic verbs indicate or refer to events that have endpoints, atelic verbs refer to events or states that don't have endpoints. From a linguistic standpoint, this can launch into a critique that every state or event in the world begins and ends at some point, with the exception of states that can be described along the lines of an existence of the universe, which basically this critique ultimately results in serving as a reminder that linking linguistic semantics to the real world is a futile attempt without considering the intermediary agent of human cognition.
AKA, it is like time itself. There's no end.
Just don't.
And stop trying.
Basically, it's also argued that atelic verbs are those that do not involve any goal or endpoint and denote actions that are realized as soon as they begin. So the example that a lot of times you'll see for the atelic is the sentence, she is walking down the street. The action, walking, has not yet been finished, so it is a action that is incomplete. She is eternal, and the point from a linguistic,
she is continuing to do so.
The point from a linguistic standpoint is in that sentence as of itself, as it stands, she will never finish walking down the street, because But then if you enter into that's where they refer to the intermediary agent of human cognition, because when we read that sentence, we understand, okay, she is walking down the street. Eventually there will be a conclusion to that, but it's not going to be in that statement of it itself.
Action verbs.
Yeah, fun. Which then we tie into, that is kind of the explanation that is here with the Vex in the garden, and the explanation of time. So this is also, I'm still really happy that Ishtar linked Tevis to this card too, because that makes me feel better about my initial reaction. You want me to just read this card? I think this is because this is, I just love Tevis. I just love Tevis.
This is my favorite card.
So it says, describe time. No, really, give it a go. You're going to say something about a sequence of events, aren't you? Seconds sliced off a clock, marching one by one off into infinity. Go ahead, use your metaphors. A line, a loop, a flat circle. Heard someone say time was like water once. At least it was novel. The Vex, they're the closest to understanding it. They've got distance from it. If time's a river, then we're fish and they're diving birds. What's wet mean to a fish? What's it mean to an osprey who's never fooled by refraction on the water's surface? Hold on now, you're going to say. This is getting a bit abstract, even for the bodiless echo of a dead guy in the garden. You want concrete truths? Something simple, digestible, a story to keep the dark out? You want time to be a staircase we keep climbing forever. But hey, even a guardian skips back a step or two now and then. Die with your ghost in range and he'll just pop you back to before that bullet, give you the chance to make a fate you like better. Nothing's been simple on Earth since that big white cue ball rolled up in from the next neighborhood over. And the stories, they don't work too well as a nightlight anymore. You're going to say, but the Traveler is our friend. The Traveler likes us. It gave us a golden age and garden worlds and guardians. You're going to say, you wouldn't be alive without it, Mr. Big Shot. Without it, I wouldn't be stuck in the Black Garden making bets with myself on which goblin's going to be the next to slip on a soggy leaf and fall off a cliff either. You took my light already. You better take my advice. I know the void's still calling, but I've come untethered. I can't reach it anymore. So if I'm right that I can reach you, you keep your ears open. I don't care how much you hate hearing it. This is important. The Vex understand time in a way we never will. Doesn't matter how long I spend here watching them. Doesn't matter how many jury-rigged portals Guardians fling themselves through. We live in time. They use it as a tool. Any moment that's ever happened, any moment that will ever happen, they can go back to it, play it again till they get it right, simulate it. The light's a counter to that. They come back, a Guardian comes back. They simulate an ending, a Guardian tears through it. Stalemate. But the Vex in the garden? They bend the knee to the garden's heart. It gives them power till you got lucky. The Vex outside, they made a different calculation. They run. But the Vex inside make the same deal you make every day of your unnatural life. And who's to say that deal won't start paying off for them again sometime soon? You can't understand the Vex, and you don't want to understand the heart. But is your ignorance any more forgivable when it's willful? Lots of questions and not a lot of answers. Better take care, or you'll drown in them. Surely as you'll drown in time, whether it's anything like a river or not. You see?
I love that card.
So
I just love Tevis. Like I can't
Right.
not read that with the with Tevis's like
With the snarkiness.
oh my god! Like I hear him like with that old elderly growl in the voice, like and the solar quote that you guys had said earlier was just perfect.
So the sole device of making the same deal with the dark side, the darkness,
That we make with
the black heart.
That's a fun thought experiment as to why the Vex that are outside are running and why they don't know what to do with the soul divisive. Also, within this one, the fact that he mentions that Guardians step back at a
That
time
threw
or
me
two.
for a loop.
So it's actually not hard to think about. Like normally when you die in like a strike, when it's not a darkness zone, you don't go back in time because the enemies that you killed are still killed. But if you're in a darkness zone and everybody dies and you wipe, you go back and start over.
Well, but you could also argue
those are
that
the
you go
moments he was
back in
talking
time, but the time is like
that you're stepping backwards and
your personal timeline is being converted, but you're not affecting the abstract timeline.
that we are stepping out of the stream and going back in at a different
Pretty
place.
much.
Yet at the same time, their perspectives of time is still going in the same rate before.
Yes. It's like when you read like in comics, like, speedsters, they experience things as going slow, or they experience things as a normal time. Like Flash will, like, they do this a lot with Flash, but they'll show it from his perspective, and like he's doing things at a normal pace for himself, but he has expedited or expedited his body, and so from an outside perspective, it's super fast. But to him, it's just normal, like it's just normal speed.
Is there anything else within this one besides just the fact that we're getting scolded by Tevis and we've had the time conversation a couple different times?
Like, does there need to be anything else?
I don't think there does. I really don't think so.
I do think, though, if that was delivered in any other way besides, like, the snarkiness from Tevis, I don't think it would have had as much impact.
I don't think we would have believed it was Tevis.
Right.
But Joseph? A Joseph is expressing a command. Joseph subjunctive expresses what the speaker/writer believes should be done in the second or third person. This amounts to a command or prohibition when seen in first person. This usually is called hortatory? Hortatory? I don't know what that is. Hortatory subjunctive, which is a form of the verb used to incite or encourage. So,
yay, Latin.
Yeah. Expresses when it should be done now. Is that a good Joseph?
Pretty much. Yes.
Okay.
I'm in danger.
I see. I'm in danger.
That's all I hear when I now. Oh no.
So this is the card where it talks about the pulses. The pulses from outside the vault come quicker now. Mm-hmm. More copies of the Ishtar Collective team arrive, using them for a boost, leapfrogging in from the dark. Their messages are getting out there, out to the ends of the Vex networks. The pulses are getting strong enough that Shim thinks they have a chance to boost data even beyond the network to physical reality. Whatever physical reality means to them and to Pradith at this point. Lifetimes deep in the Vex projections. Pradith is attuned to the rhythm of the vault. When another pulse lines up with that momentary weakness, that lets his radio work. He pushes a message through. It doesn't bounce back. It has gone through. He whoops raggedly. A dozen Ishtar Collective scientists return the cheer. They start to send messages scattershot wherever they can. Whenever the pulse climbs high enough to boost their signal. That works for a while. Then the pulses get too strong enough to destroy the integrity of the messages. Instead of skimming along the top, riding the wave, the messages tumble through it and shake apart under its power. If they're getting strong enough to unravel data, it could be they're getting strong enough to carry something heavier than a pile of code. It's worth a try, Pradith thinks. Anything is at this point. Something is coming, a tidal wave shadow looming over every timeline he can see. Its peak rises sharp over the earth, breaking the Terminator's arc with a deeper darkness. The city can't escape it. Pradith carves messages into the last functional pieces of his gear, anything that can serve as a bottle for his messages, thrown out on time's ocean. And what does a guardian pay more attention to than their equipment? They'll catch someone's eye, someone. He knows the wave is coming. More visions flicker past him now, burning after images into his eyelids. More timelines, a possibility or eventuality he doesn't know, lost to the encroaching dark. He knows they won't be able to handle it alone. He knows they need a warning. They need to know it's coming. Soon.
So I have a question. Our first instance with No Time to Explain is probably one of these messages as well. With the way that No Time to Explain happened. Right. But if he's worried about...
the flavor text on No Time to Explain is a single word is etched onto the inside of the weapon's casing. Soon. But what is soon, I guess, is the main question from that. Is he talking about the darkness coming? Is he talking about the pyramid ships? Or endless questions of what?
It's unclear at this point, but whatever it is, it's interesting too, because he's had these various visions of different timelines, but he hadn't seen this. So whatever we have done so far has started triggering possibly this aspect to start happening within the Vex timelines. Like, we're triggering these events because he hadn't seen them before. Are we capable of altering the timeline because of our paracausalities? Which, if Saint is any indication, we are. Blue, any thoughts on this guy?
I think you're right on there, because as a paracausal entity, it's a matter of what is stronger. in this regard. Like, you know, how big of a scope is the causal forces against which our paracausality will be pitted against. You know, it's one thing for one person to kind of hop skip a little bit here and there. It's a whole different thing to change an entire, you know, Titanic worth of direction. And I think that's going to be, again, I think that's where we're going to see Season of Dawn start to kind of answer that question is, you know, and then, I mean, also the question too is like, remember that it's not just one Guardian. We have an army of Guardians. So if, you know, is there a way to channel all that paracausal capability, you know?
Here's my question is the reason why it's happening now, because there's been Guardians for quite a long time, even with Praedyth and Pahanan and Pajari. Is it because our Guardian is affecting other paracausal forces within the universe that this is causing the timelines to adjust? Because if it's not, because Guardians are always that extra factor anyway, right? So everything a Guardian does could theoretically change the course of time. But because we're also affecting other things that are paracausal as well, although the Undying Mind isn't necessarily paracausal, it's just because it's outside of time within the networks and everything until we start dragging it into the Black Garden during the Vex Offensive.
Also, how do we know we have all of them killed?
How do we know we have all the Undying Minds killed?
Ikora said so.
Mm-hmm.
Why would she ever lie to us?
I don't.
That's what I have to say to that. Do we actually know?
All of them they could monitor. Vuru caught that too. So there may be more Vex Minds, Undying Minds out there that we just couldn't see or couldn't monitor.
That would be silly.
There could be infinite possibilities.
Like I said, depending on the model of multiverse that we're operating on.
Right.
Yeah. Just like a side note, when we were talking in the intro session, this is where I started questioning, when is this actually happening? Because they talk about kind of hinting at the no time to explain with the soon part. I mean, to us, we got that years ago. So is this something that he saw now, and so he sent that to the past to warn us about something, or...
I mean, we just gave Saint 14 the shotgun that Saint 14 gives us in Curse of Osiris.
We had a full-on argument about that in our clan, by the way.
After we had to remake it, even though it's sitting in our vault.
Right.
I mean... It's made with love.
I'm like, where are you going with that, Greg? Where you going? I mean.
Made with love for Sainty.
We broke time.
Okay, so
yeah, we break time a lot.
Well, I mean, we're just learning to step a little bit.
A little bit.
A little bit. Do you want to talk about how Maya Shim and Dwayne McKnight step and then volative card?
Oh gosh.
Oh.
That's the first one.
Volative.
No, this is,
denoting a verb or mood that expresses a desire. In certain languages, this is a verb form which indicates that a certain action is willed, although it may not be performed in fact, aka... you can wish to do something right the first time, but it may not happen. And poor Maya, Shim, and Dwayne. Here's how it goes. You and Maya and Shim and Dwayne McKnight take your first cautious sliding steps into the Vex information network. You get your footing. You've got to translate everything into metaphor to understand it. Here, and this is like tightrope walking on a grease line. You and Maya lean into each other. Shim slips and you help him up. You explore. You go on. And basically there's like multiple versions of this. some where you lose Dr. Shem, some where you lose Maya. It's not a fun kind of thing. Maya gets lost a lot, apparently.
She's really bad at following directions or reading maps.
Is that, I mean, is it maps
I just love the fact that she's the one that constantly gets lost. Like, I'm like, seriously? Listen.
It goes back to what you were saying, Blue, where it's like, as soon as they split off from each other, like, yeah, they're the same person, but then it's like they almost have their own destinies when they split.
Yeah.
Or they make their own paths.
It's the multiple man error, which is what I refer to. There's a guy in, I think it's Marvel, who's called Multiple Man. He's able to split himself into multiple people or multiple iterations of himself. The problem is that once they're split from him, like they were him at the moment of splitting, but then and you see this also with
they're all their own
they develop their own personalities. And there's a point in the comic where actually it goes like years and he doesn't bring them back, and there's one who like rebels against it. And it's this huge thing. And then, like, in this recent one, we have an instance where one of Osiris's projections, I think, commits suicide. He kills himself, if I remember correctly. And Osiris is like,
really?
Yeah, it's either he kills himself or he does something that he wasn't, like, he's not supposed to do. But he goes against Osiris's, like, wishes. Basically he develops his own personality, and it's called out because Osiris is like, that's never happened.
Weird. Let's see here. There's not really a happy ending to this card.
No.
Even like there's really not. And is it from Chioma's perspective?
Yes,
that's how I took it. Yes,
I really would agree with that.
I'm reading it from Chioma's perspective too. Because there's Maya didn't like bracelets, said they always fouled her work. Her hair had been getting shaggy again and was due for a trim. She could never decide whether or not to grow it out. She laughed at you lifting weights to maintain simulated muscle, but she spotted for you all the same, which Chioma was she was the one who was kind of the bodybuilder back in the original cards, wasn't she? Like she was the lifter back then too.
Yeah.
I mean, Ver is talking in chat. You've got to translate everything into metaphor to understand it here. And this is like doing a foray transform on yourself down the blade of a sundial. Interesting phrasing at the end. I mean, it's abstract concepts. Abstract concepts cannot be defined because language cannot accurately be created at the moment to define it. So abstraction, it makes sense that they would have to create their own metaphors to understand what's going on. But that brings us to the last card, which we kind of talked about at the very beginning, Irialis. Blue, did you want to go into Irialis a little bit before I just read and finish this guy out?
So Irialis, like I said, it's basically the bookend that is opposed to Realis. And it's a verb that is inflicted to indicate that an act or a state of being is not a fact. Although the only Irialis mood in English is the subjunctive mood. Some other languages include additional Irialis moods, including cohortive, jussive, speculative, and optative. So we talked about jussive a little bit above. The example within English is the phrase, "It is necessary that he work." And what that refers to here is the desirable state of affairs, not the reality of the fact. So in this situation, in this example, the subject, he, could be refusing or rejecting to work, thus the subjunctive mood of work. So you don't have working, you have just the tense work. Whereas with a realis, the statement would be he is working. This one is he, I just scrolled away. It is necessary that he work. Like it's something that's not currently happening, so therefore it might not happen.
But it should happen.
Well, it's the desired state.
Well, desired state of the intent of the phrase.
Right.
So what is the non-reality that we're going to read here?
I think that it's really the next line. Like after the last line here, it's a matter of, you know, it's they are always. I mean, I'm going to jump to the end. They are always stepping through. So the desired end is that they stepped through, but they're not stepping through, or they haven't stepped through. They are stepping through, which is a really annoying sentence to say, but it's the same as what we were kind of talking about with the atelic. They are stepping through, whereas the action of stepping is not yet finished. And so the irrealis is that they would like to have stepped through, but they have not done that yet. They are still in the process of stepping. So we don't know for a fact that they actually succeeded on this, what is it? The MacGyvered, what was it? The data transfer, the USB stick.
Yeah. I thought the easiest way for me to think about it was like making a bridge between point A and point B, which is very like dumbed down version of it, but it made sense.
I like the
to
fact
me.
that Chioma tells Maya that she's an angel. It just, again, going back to Chioma as the weightlifter, it just made me laugh, because how big is a transistor compared to a pin? Are you calling me an angel?
It's such a strange.
I just love them. Oh my gosh.
They're ornery. They're super ornery between. So, the garden wakes and the undying mind wakes with it. It rises from the burrow that has grown up around it, shedding vines and hanging moss like bed sheets. Circuits flood with power, pass the excess along to the next in line, flex massive limbs and boot sequences. Goblins write more circuits and wield them to the mind, building it up to take the advantage of the power. Not an occasional pulse now, but a steady hum. Their faith has been rewarded. In the vault, 183 sets of simulated Golden Age scientists flex their own limbs, ready to make a break for it. Pradith, kneeling at his radio, shakes out his hands. They're stiff. He's stiff, queasy with exertion and worry, and a stack of lifetimes in a cell, but ready. How big is a transistor compared to a pin, do you know? He can't tell which Maya is speaking. There are 165 of her spread between the teams. Are you calling me an angel? This is Chioma, amused. Pradith knows which team it is now. 227.72s. Chioma sounds hoarser than the others. He doesn't know why. Maya again. Would you like to dance? Dwayne McKnight snorts in 100-part harmony, and 80 shims grin and elbow him in the metaphorical ribs. It's a slim chance, but a chance they all need. The garden's massive doors hums, an echo of the song the goblins sing as they tend the flowers. The first minotaur readies itself to step through, shield coming awake around it. Everything that has happened is, from a certain point of view, always happening. Everything that will happen is happening. If you know how to slice the ribbon of chronology thin enough, you can step through to the necessary moment, if you know how to tear it. 160 Mayas reach for Chiomas by their side. 158 Chiomas reach back. One Pradith, waiting for the conductor's baton to drop. Unaccountable Vex in the garden, waiting for the same event. A synchrony none of them notice. Somewhere a veil is always lifting. Somewhere Caber is always dooming himself. Somewhere a door is always opening. Somewhere they are always stepping through.
Do you think that this is foreshadowing for an event that we're actually going to see?
I would like it to be.
Right? It might be wishful
Do you think we'll
thinking,
get to
though?
return to the vault? I mean, I can see us going back to the vault for something else.
Yeah, I think with all the Vex happening, we've had so many answers from the vault that there's a possibility that we could go back there to see if we can dig up more. But are we going to be able to read the answers, I think is the real question. Like, are we going to be able to see are we going to be able to see the answers like how Praedyth has seen them?
Praedyth, I think once Praedyth walks out, won't be able to see it. Well, he's not walking out. The Shim and them were walking out, but I don't think they'll have access to it anymore once they leave. But it'll be interesting to see if it goes on. Blue, shoutouts, final thoughts.
I mean, I think that's the other two is like the question of where is this? I think my final thought on this is where are they stepping out? Like, are they becoming real in Praedyth's realm, or are they all stepping out of the prison that is Praedyth is in? Does that make sense?
I mean, they're stepping out into the Vex network again from Praedyth. Like, they went from the Praedyth's prison into the Vex network and then trying to step out of the network itself.
But where are they stepping out? Are they stepping out into his prison cell?
Right.
Are they stepping out into, like, the tower?
No. Reality is what it seems like, into the vault.
Right.
Possibly.
So, but I mean, I guess that's what I'm asking is when they leave the network, because I agree. I think that this is the Spelunker teams leaving the network, but
right.
Yeah. And see, Dino's kind of touching on it too. Is like, are they trying to possess Vex, or are they trying to create themselves? Like, I mean, that's where my question kind of is like, what exactly is the goal here? Right. Like, what's trying to be done?
Oh God.
Right.
The idea of them possessing Vexes makes that whole cutscene at the beginning of Shadowkeep way creepier.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, that's the thing is like, I mean, because it also begs the question: is this also Praedyth trying to escape? I mean, I know he's probably trying to escape, but is he actually trying to escape, or is he just orchestrating this to allow them to leave the network and come into reality? Which then begs the question: which reality? Is it his, or is it ours? Like what
Right. I don't know. Is it the reality in which Aldrin actually shows up, or are we just going to get that silly ship with him and?
Pretty sure that's going to happen in the dawning.
They did.
Poor Aldrin. They did such a good job with that card, by the way. Like, making you feel sorry for him. Anyway. I don't know if the dawning... Season of the Dawn. The name of the season has kind of bugged me, and it's like, it's too simple, too on the nose for me to think that it's just in reference to the dawning itself. But the dawning of a new era within the game, perhaps,
right.
Or dawning of something coming back,
or is it shedding
like the black
light
heart
on something?
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping it's shedding light on something because answers are really nice sometimes.
I mean, we have a lot of interesting things pop up this season already. I can't wait to dig into constellations. But beyond that, shout-outs for me as far as for this evening. Shout out to Live Chat, who always keeps us on our toes, always keeps us honest, always has some great ideas, as well as some great funny moments, too. I'm looking at you, Vero. Thank you guys for showing up week after week. We really appreciate that. Paige, you got anything?
Well, most of them have gone to bed, but shout out to my clan for supporting me, because they actually get to listen to me talk with people of like minds instead of me talking at them.
Yay! Yay!
Shout out to my husband who's attempting to be quiet. He gives me the eyes. But otherwise, just shout out to you and Blue for having me. This was fun.
Yeah.
I like chit-chatting.
It's been fun. You know what I kind of want to do, Blue?
Uh-oh. Yes.
And I'm getting this on recording, that this is something I'd like to do. This is not necessarily something we will do, but I know we have like the round table with the quote unquote, lore masters
the DLQR
group kind of thing, but Yeah, I'd like to do something with others that it's just not just like a live chat, but have like people come in possibly just to do like a let's chat where we're just discussing thing a little bit less formally, but just kind of debating the theories and stuff like that and just randomly throwing out theories and discussing them and everybody's ideas.
So my first question back to you is, are we going to allow Rick on to that show?
Yep, he wants to do that. He wants to do timeline talk with you.
See, that's a rabbit hole. You're gonna push someone down the rabbit hole, and it's never gonna end.
I know. But the thing is, it's Man-at-Arms. So why not put Man-at-Arms on the frickin' show to talk about timeline and blow his mind?
Think about what you just said there. Why not put Man-at-Arms on it? I love his Titans take on lore, the daily. I think someone was saying, look at a Titans take on lore. He's beaten down the Warlock's synopsis into crayon size bits.
I do think it would be cool to have like almost like a debate team go on where you have to bring up your point of views and your theories, and you guys get to either deny them or support them. I think that would be cool.
Oh gosh, like a challenge the lore people kind of thing.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Ooh, that gets scary.
I'm gonna require a lot of phone a friends on those.
Oh yeah,
right.
Okay, so
It's
picture
like-
that happens to me in the clan all the time. They're like, Paige, why do you think this? Or Paige, that doesn't make sense. I'm like, but lore. You gotta look
you have
at
that
the
crazy look in your eye. Oh man. All right. Blue.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, again, one more big shout out to all the narrative team for Season of the Dawn, and also a big shout out to, I think it's Ariella, who was the author of this particular lore book. It's just amazing job. Seriously amazing job.
Ooh.
Yes.
Ooh. Shout out to the devs in general for all the QLR, quality of life updates that we've gotten. There are so many different things that have just been changed slightly that is brought back kind of the old feel of D1, but also have kept the integrity of what D2 is, and I'm enjoying it thoroughly.
Well, that, and I mean, I was explaining to someone the other day just like how mind-boggling it is, the support that the Destiny devs give. It's like, if you actually think about it, we get a weekly update of things, and we've been getting weekly updates for this game since launch. Like, they've never missed an update. Like, there's sometimes that'll take a little bit longer, which, I mean, whatever. That's just being in IT. But like, there's always an update, and I just think that I mean, when you stop and think about that just really doesn't. It's not very common in today's games, and I think that should be. I'm really glad that on Game Awards they got that award, because that really does. It really is something that sets them apart, and it just really is something that even as a casual player is really appreciated. I think that's just. I mean, they just seriously they don't hesitate to communicate. They don't hesitate to Dancing's talking about the community artist publicity. that's freaking amazing.
Not only publicity, just
sharing,
the fact that you can buy like Monkus'
they're sharing
shirt
they're sharing their store
and
space with them. I mean, that's really unheard of. Like, I don't know any other publisher that really does that.
Well, their support and their communication throughout the Destiny community is just phenomenal.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Even if you just follow like the Bungie help page on Twitter, when something pops up, they're not waiting hours and hours to address it. They're like, hey, this is happening in the game right now, and we know it's happening. We're working to fix it.
Right. And
so that's always nice to see.
Yeah, it really is. So, I mean, but a huge shout out to them. I think they they definitely got the award that they earned that very much. So I also love the fact that Luke nearly dropped it. I have not seen anyone mention that, and every time I watch it, I die laughing. Like, I just like the look on his face too. It's just, oh my gosh, it's
He's
so
like,
great.
Oh, that almost
I'm
happened.
like, I'm tempted to, because like, of like, was he actually playing or did he actually nearly drop it? I'm pretty sure he's playing, but there's a part of me that's like, I don't know. But no, yeah, it's huge. I mean, huge shout out to them. But I don't have anything else. Green, did you have any announcements that we needed to get out of the way?
One more week of recording this month, and then Blue and I are going on holiday. But we should still... I'm trying to think. Do we have something else coming out at the end of this month?
No, I don't. But if you do, what I am trying to do is I'm putting in, and I need to announce this on Twitter too, to start getting questions for this. I am trying to get together with a family member, extended family member of mine who is a CPA. I know that there's a lot of times around the New Year's, there's a lot of questions about what you need to do to get ready for tax prep and stuff. So I'm actually going to be sitting down with him and kind of walking through just like some basic, FAQs. So for content creators specifically. So if there is anybody out there who listens and who has like questions, please shoot them over to me so that I can get them over to him so he can, start preparing, because obviously legality reasons. He just needs to make sure that he gives a correct answer and all that. So if you do have questions of that nature, I will be putting out something on Twitter here, hopefully this weekend, I believe, about that. So, but yeah, other than that, I don't think I have anything else. So as always, until next time, goodbye. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusedFireChat. Links to all our episode archives can be found at www.thelorenetwork.com. Please be sure to email us at focusedfirechat@gmail.com with any comments and or questions for the team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. So until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.